Hi all. We are going to be going over in this video drafting survey questions. And I hope you really have fun with this. Of course, we're going to be doing this on the evaluation that we're studying for class, so the project that we are evaluating in class. But as you do this, you might be thinking about survey questions you might use if you would do something mixed methods for your dissertation. But at any rate, since we're studying all this stuff about creating items and creating surveys and quantitative measures that are valid and reliable, it should be an interesting exercise. So your group should have come up with a definition for your construct. It doesn't have to be perfect. You might have trolled the internet a little bit, maybe found one article. Based on that definition, I'd like you to draft a set of questions that you think might measure that construct, or at least aspects of that construct. And you should draft more than you need, because in the next face-to-face class, we will go over those questions and think about what makes a good survey question and cull out ones that aren't as good. So in contrast to interviews, surveys are efficient tools. So we know they have shortcomings, right? But they also have strengths. They're efficient tools for collecting information from a large group, right? You wouldn't be able to interview, say, 100 people. They're also used when it's not possible to observe behavior. So when you're asking people about behaviors and things they do and things they think without someone else there. They can be used to compare groups. And of course, they can be used to determine relationships between variables if you want to do something quantitative. And again, as we go through this class, one of the arguments that I am trying to build with all of you is that quantitative evidence and quantitative arguments can be used in service of social justice. And sometimes people in power will only believe a quantitative argument and quantitative evidence. So for those of you who are thinking about the stages of evaluation research, if you're doing evaluation with research with surveys, we need to add kind of a mini set of steps that has to do with surveys. So first, we want to specify the research questions and or the logic model, which we've done already. And then specify the target population, which in our evaluation is already made clear. Then we develop the instrument. That's what we're doing in this slide, this video, the next couple of weeks. We would want to establish how are we going to analyze the data and establish the reliability and validity of the instrument. Now, this is something we probably won't do in this class, except for maybe a little bit of face validity. Then we select our sample. So who is it we're going to survey? And you conduct the survey and then you analyze the results. So that's part of, if you're doing survey research as part of an evaluation study, this is kind of a set of steps that are needed to do that survey research. Now for sources of questions, and this is really important for those of you who are thinking of doing mixed methods or survey research in your dissertation. And I'm very happy to talk to you about this anytime because this is something I grapple with all the time. One source of questions is that you yourself create them, all right? So one of the strengths is that they can be more valid to the purpose of your research, right? They can be very specific to the purpose of your research. Whereas if you get an instrument or a survey from someone else, maybe it's measuring something slightly different than what you're interested in. Because of that, the survey you create could be more just, right? You could make sure that the questions and the items are more respectful and more just in the way that they approach the folks who are taking the survey. The shortcomings is that it does take a long time to create your own survey questions, and we're not doing this for this particular exercise in the evaluation. But for your dissertation, you would probably need to do focus groups or interviews to come up with the survey questions, or at least to validate them, right? To make sure that they're not off in left field. In addition, you could make mistakes in the construction of the items. I do all the time. So when I create my own survey questions, and then I actually always do interviews with the population that I would be giving the survey to, they always point out things that are wrong with those questions. So that's another potential issue. If you're using previously validated surveys, you go to the literature, maybe you're looking for a survey on engagement and there's something already there. It's been validated, maybe it's been used across populations, maybe someone has already established content validity, maybe they've examined things like epistemic validity. They've usually looked at reliability, these kinds of things, right? But on the other hand, may not be as good or solid for your context. Now, people do sometimes, and I actually do this, take some survey questions from a previously validated survey, and that is actually okay. That is a perfectly fine thing to do, as long as you justify, I am taking this construct or this area or this set of questions from this survey. So, different kinds of questions. The two big types are unstructured or open questions, right? These allow respondents to reply in their own words, such as, please list the top 3 ways in which participation in our professional development has shifted your approach to science education, and why. So we're looking for an open-ended response. This is going to generate some great, meaningful data, right? This is going to be very rich, hopefully, if I can actually get people to write things down. It's a bit of a problem sometimes. But it's very difficult to quantify. You can do tally marks, and that's okay, but it's hard to say it's a hard number and then use it as part of understanding a relationship. Usually qualitative data analysis is required. On the other hand, you have structured or closed questions. These are often multiple choice, like A, B, C, D, and they require the respondent to choose from a predetermined set of responses. This you would use quantitative analysis. There is less meaning embedded. As soon as you turn a person's idea into a number, there is automatically less meaning. It cleans the meaning out. But you can now do quantitative analyses, and you can maybe even generalize to a broader population. So as you create a set of questions for the evaluation we're doing in class, I would like you to consider a couple of open-ended questions and then maybe 5 or 8 closed questions as you do your brainstorming. And I'm going to be turning now to some different formats for closed-ended questions. They can be quite creative, and I really encourage you to get creative in terms of both the evaluation and if you end up doing survey research for your dissertation. So an example of a typical closed question is a Likert scale. This Likert scale is from strongly disagree to strongly agree, right? And you can see we're asking teachers here how the professional development has influenced their teaching. So I have shifted my practice due to interaction with our PD. Then they can select strongly disagree to strongly agree. I appreciate the presence of the PD in my school. The PD has made very little difference in teaching of science, etc. Now, you might already be suspecting that all 4 of these items are getting at the same construct, all right? So we would actually not only take the number in the Likert scale, but we would average them together for each person. So the overall score for this person for this construct would actually be all 4 of these items averaged together. Here's another way of doing kind of a Likert scale. This is an instrument I use a lot to understand the way that teachers' pedagogical values align with the values of particular reforms. All right, so I have a statement at the top. In this case, the role of teachers should shift from being the primary source of knowledge to being a facilitator of learning, etc. I ask teachers to read it and say, select which set of circles represents the overlap between your present educational philosophies or values and the above statement. And so, of course, the one furthest to the right is absolutely, I completely believe this to be true. This is my value. And the one furthest to the left is like, no way, right? And so you really get, because this is not just A, B, C, D, and it's this visual, for some people this works better to kind of get a true sense of like my alignment. Other common scales have to do with how often. frequency. It could be once a month, 2 or 3 times a month, a few times a week. And you can see here that in a scale we use that we created to understand science instructional practices, we ask a scale from never to daily or almost daily, and then several items. And again, I'm showing you a few items that make up one construct, particularly generating questions or predictions to explore, identifying questions from observations, and choosing variables to investigate. Other ways that you might ask closed-ended questions are just asking for specific numerical responses, like how many minutes per week do you teach science? You can ask for grid responses. Here you see a question where I'm asking for number of hours that teachers have taken particular kinds of professional development over 2 years. So then they can think about, well, how much math compared to how much language arts compared to how much science, which we're actually really wanting them to compare, right? So having a grid is helpful if you want people to think through, oh, well, was it a lot more language arts? In many cases, the answer is yes. One kind of area you can run into trouble is that if you give numerical ranges, you should really understand, well, what's the anticipated range? So for example, one time we asked a question, how many years have you been a teacher? And then we came up with these numbers, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10, and 11 plus, thinking that the teachers would be distributed across. But what we got was 70% of the teachers in our program had taught 11 plus years. So we needed to actually expand the range and so that to actually get a true feel for how long our teachers had been teaching. So this is another reason why doing an interview or at least bringing your instrument to the people that you're going to be giving it to really helps you understand, is this actually going to work? We've talked about this before, just to kind of reiterate that if you're going to have Likert scales, which is strongly agree to strongly disagree, very true to not at all true, never to always, these kinds of scales, you need multiple questions or multiple items in the same construct, usually at least 3. So this is an example of this. This is a couple of scales, a couple of constructs from someone else's survey, Garrett et al. From 1999, where they're asking about content, knowledge that's been increased through participation in PD and how much active learning occurred. And you can see there's 2 different scales. One is strongly agree to strongly disagree, and one of them is all of the time to not at all. Okay, so that's it for this little mini mini lecture. Enjoy, go off, make survey questions. I encourage you to search on Google Scholar for your construct and see if you can come up with some previous surveys. You may choose to use them, or you can just use them for ideas. I do that a lot. I'll look up previously created surveys and be like, well, I don't exactly like it, but I see what they're doing. And I'm going to get some ideas off of that. And then I usually do cite them.